You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Hella Well with Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle Washington, and I don't typically talk about politics, which is kind of funny saying that my major was political science. I worked in politics for years. From 4 to 25, it was like that was going to be my thing. I wanted to fight for change. And today I had to talk about a topic. And if you looked at the title of today's podcast, it's Woman, Life, Freedom. Woman, Life, Freedom is a slogan that women in Iran are chanting, women across the globe are chanting after some major ish occurred. And I wanted to bring it to your attention because I want you to share this podcast. I want you to share this message so it gets out, because people's voices are being stifled and you have a chance to continue the conversation, to get this message out there. So I wanted to help spread this message, but I also wanted to just talk about, what does it mean to be a woman? What does that life look like? Also, what is freedom for us? And so that is today's topic. But how do we get here? What kind of started this catalyst? What was like the fuel to this fire? If you haven't been paying attention to the news, catalyst to this conversation today, it was the death of a 22-year-old Iranian woman named Masha Imani, who was in police custody because she wasn't allegedly wearing her headscarf properly. So whether her hair might have been showing, it wasn't, whatever. There's these morality police in Iran, and they detained her for not wearing her headscarf properly. What's happened afterwards sounds probably really familiar for many African Americans in America, but this person was detained in police custody and somehow 2 days later was in a coma and had died. You know, witnesses say that she sustained several blows to the head. There's shocking photos online. I don't know how many are online, but there's some shocking photos that have made it to the internet. And it has just galvanized the nation in Iran, but it's also galvanized women and people across the globe to say, this is not okay. There's been protests in over 50 cities in Iran, with over 50 people killed since her death, and over hundreds of people who have been arrested and injured through that. And it made me think back to my life as a Black woman in America, but it also made me think woman, life, freedom, which is what they've been chanting in the streets as a part of the protest, where they're in the streets taking off their headscarves, they're in the streets cutting their hair in protest to say that this is not acceptable. We are not standing for this anymore. Woman, life, freedom. What does it mean to be a woman? If you think about it, we go back to all the way back into history, depending how you look at history. If you kind of come from the spiritual side of it, woman was created out of Adam, out of one of his ribs. Woman, Eve, was created for Adam. A woman is created for a man, if you are going from the biblical standpoint. Whether you believe that or not, I'm not here to debate that part of it all. But women in society are key. Whether you look at it from science or from the biblical terms, women are literally, we are maintaining the human society. Why? Because we create life. Men cannot create life without us, not yet. So we literally are the key factor in maintaining the human society. Yet, there are so many countries, including America, where we have this patriotic society that says, yeah, cool, you can maintain human society. We'll let you give birth because we need you. But outside of that, we're going to exclude you from full participation in the political and economic life. And we may give you little crumbs here and there, but there'll be glass ceilings. There'll be conditioning that will hold you back Even though we will say like, oh, you're free, but we're going to take away your right to choose how you use your body. Woman life freedom. As a woman, it feels like history has set us up to be less than a man. When in reality, when we're the ones giving life, I kind of feel like we should be a little bit above everyone or just equal. I'm fine with being equal, but that's not the way many things are set up. And it definitely ain't set up that way in Iran. And it's definitely set up this way in America. So what kind of life are we expected to have? You think about these things where, especially in Iran, these women have been fighting for rights just to, be able to divorce, the rights of their bodies, the rights to wear the headscarf or not. And that's what, right now, they're literally in the streets fighting for their justice. And when you think about the fights that women have been in for liberties and feminism and rights just to be considered equal, to be considered to have a seat at the table, that's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of long-term effects that go into that. There's a lot of long-term effects that show up in the body, show up in our DNA. And as women who are creating life, we're passing that trauma on to our descendants. We're passing on those moments of feeling like I'm not enough. I have these thought processes that says that I'm less than because I am a woman. And we don't even fully know the full effects, but we do know trauma shows up in the body in many different ways and is passed down. Like we look at slavery, it can be passed down like 7 generations. So imagine the generations in Iran that are going through what they're going through now and what they're passing down, that long-term effects of those traumas. But also think about the long-term effects that happen in the trauma and the situations that we face today here in America. What does it mean to be a woman in America? What does it mean to be a woman in general? It depends where you are. We have fought. The funny thing is, when you look woman, life, freedom, go back to the freedom part of it all, women have been showing up in revolutions from the start of time. Women were in the American Revolution. They were in the French Revolution. Women were even in the 1979 revolution in Iran that got the government that's in there now where they are. Women were standing in front of the tanks and they were at the forefront of that revolution in Iran. And then once they got what they wanted, they're like, okay, women, now we're going to make sure that you take several seats back. We're going to start creating sanctions against you. How is that a way to thank the people who got you there? I think the same way about women just here in America. We have been fighting for so many different things. We were part of so many different revolutions. Yet, we still live in a society that doesn't truly treat us as equal. And I think about women like Masha Imani or people who are fighting on her behalf. Those women who are out there in the streets, cutting their hair, in the streets, not wearing their headscarves, in protest, defining against the law that's saying that that is not the right way to do it. You are now breaking the law because you are going against the moral police's ideal of what is moral to do. These women are brave, but they're just ordinary women. They're ordinary women who are saying, I am done. This is not the life that I want to live. This is not how I choose to raise my children. This is not how I choose to live my life. They're just ordinary women. But we have a lot of ordinary women who did some extraordinary things here in America. You think of Ella Baker, who many don't know was a co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was headed by Martin Luther King, who was, as seen as the figurehead of the Civil Rights Movement. But Ella Baker was right there. She was behind the scenes doing a lot of the work. She was an inspiring force behind the creation of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which did the sit-ins and all those type of things. There's so many women beyond Ella Baker that we don't know about who were instrumental in making sure I can literally marry someone who's white if I want to. I can have a job. I can drink out of any water fountain, go to any bathroom. But we don't know about those women who fought for our freedom, because we always pay attention to the men because that's the society that we've grown up into. Then you look at the Maribel sisters in Dominican Republic, and this whole situation reminded me a lot of that situation, where the Maribel sisters, if you don't know them, there's an amazing book called In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. But there's been movies as well. Movies aren't really the best, but you can watch them. The book is amazing. But I encourage you to learn more about their stories. But these sisters, there's 4 sisters, but 3 of them were really active in fighting against the dictatorship, Trujillo, El Jefe, as he was called, in Dominican Republic, and they were killed. They were assassinated, they were strangled, clubbed, and then they tried to hide it by putting them back in their car and then shoving them off a mountain. But those sisters ended up becoming a symbol for freedom. And they were utilized to be the tipping point for other people in the country to be like, this isn't good. Just like when you saw in the civil rights movement, when people were sitting at the lunch counters, doing sit-ins and being nonviolent, and they were being hosed down, attacked by dogs. That's when others were seeing like, I think this isn't good. Or you go back to George Floyd not so long ago, when people saw him being strangled, to saying, I can't breathe. And others were saying like, I think this is not good. I'm going to get involved. So in Iran, I'm hoping this is the tipping point for them. I'm hoping Marsha's life is the tipping point to say, yeah, woman, life, freedom. When is it time to create a better life for our women and to give them some freedom? We have so many women who have been a part of that. You think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a leading force in gender equality here in America. But again, we sit here and talk about all these different things, and we say that they started a debate. Now, we can't pretend that this never happened. They can't pretend in Iran, even though they're trying really hard. They're cutting off internet access. They're trying to make sure that journalists aren't printing anything. They're trying to stop the story from getting out. They're trying to stop the spread of the craziness that's going on, the insaneness that seems insane, but to them, like, this is right. Why would we not kill women? She was not wearing her headscarf right. I could see a sliver of her hair. She needs to be killed over that. So yeah, the police can pretend this never happened, but it did. Women took their headscarves off. They were walking down the street, and it started a debate. It started a debate that where I'm having this conversation today, and I'm encouraging you to have this conversation with your friends. But having the debate and starting the conversation is one thing. What we do after that is a whole other ballgame. And I encourage us to look, okay, so we're looking at freedom in Iran, but what is our tipping point? What is the point to where we start looking at things that are in plain sight, hidden in our lives, that's going on in our country, that is affecting our lives as women, that's affecting our lives as our freedom? I go back to looking at Malcolm X, who said the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman. You look at Breonna Taylor, who was a Black woman chilling in her bed and was killed, and they still haven't prosecuted the police for her brutal death. You look at Roe versus Wade, and that being overturned, and women being stripped of their rights to control how they see and use their bodies here in America. At what point do we stand and say enough is enough as a collective? At what point do we make the changes? Do we see things? I feel like things are going backwards. I feel like literally since 45 was in office, we have been reverting back and losing our rights as women. We've been reverting back and losing our rights as people of color. And not just our rights, our freedom. And the lifestyle, a lifestyle that we can enjoy, a lifestyle that we desire, the lifestyle that we deserve. Like, I feel uncomfortable being a Black woman in America. Not because I don't like being a woman, because I love being a woman. As much as we go through, I would not change being a woman one bit. I would never be like, nope, I want to switch. I don't want to change for another team. And I love being a black woman. I don't want to be any other race. There's such beauty and uniqueness about being a black woman. And if you don't know, listen to Beyonce and you will learn. We are alien superstars. But that being said, it's not easy. There are challenges that we go through that I do agree that we are probably the most unprotected person here in America. And I don't feel that we are doing enough as a country to make sure that we are living a certain life that protects us, that we are living a certain life that values us. But I flip it on the other side to say that we have been playing a role in that. It's not just other people doing things to us and we're the victim. Nah. I don't think the women in Iran are victims either. We have played a role in saying, yes, we gave consent to say that we are okay with this. Well, we may not really be okay, but when you're not silent, when you're silent and you're not speaking up about this, when you're not fighting against these injustices, you're consenting to saying that it's okay. And the deeper part of this, and it goes back to that life and that trauma and the long-term effects, is we don't even realize that we are consenting because it is what it is. Oh, to be a woman in America, especially think about back in the 80s or the 70s or even the 50s. I think in the 50s you couldn't have a bank account. I think it was 50s or 40s. I watched too many random TV shows. But one of those time frames, a woman couldn't even open her own bank account without her husband's consent, without his signature. Is that not crazy? Her own bank account. Like getting jobs, looking at women who were the first to be a part of, you think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was the second woman on the Supreme Court after the Supreme Court had been around for so many years. We just had the first black woman on the Supreme Court now after many years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But we have not always done the work to realize that the role that we play in how women's lives and freedoms are affected in our government and in our social economics. We don't. So I wanted to have this conversation to bring that up. I wanted us to think about what role are we playing and how we are being treated. And what can we do now to make those changes? So think about that. A huge part of that is awareness. Awareness that we're living in a mass that says patriarchy is okay. The awareness that the roles that we are playing into accepting that this patriarchal society and how things are showing up is okay. The second part of that is getting involved. For Iran, for even the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a movement that was going on, which was great. But when we have these small movements, and I'm not saying Black Lives Matter, it was a small movement because it definitely is a big movement, but I'm saying when we have some movements that are smaller, going kind of street movements, to make them impactful, the second part of that is making sure that these street movements can be impactful and can make a change in policy and governance. And that comes with being organized. A leaderless revolt, by extension, is disorganized. And so for us as women, wherever you are, you could be in America, you could be in Iran, you could be in Jamaica, you can be in the UK. Women, the story goes from wherever you are. You start with the awareness. You start with the action of just even voicing yourself. So how can you support these women in Iran? By sharing their story. How can you support yourself and other women in wherever you're located, whether it's your country, whether it's your state, whether it's your city? How can you support? By getting involved, by checking yourself and how you are participating in it. And I say you, I also need to check myself. Like, how have I been showing up? And how have I been complacent in the life that I've been deemed to live? And I feel like it goes back to that mindset that I talk about constantly. It's like, for me to say, I'm not wearing the mask anymore. For me to say I'm no longer hiding or I'm trying to be my authentic self is me saying I'm not going to buy into what society tells me is the norm. The norm is, as a Black woman, you need to work extra hard to be equal. The norm is you need to sacrifice to show your love. I am actively fighting what the norm is to get to my freedom. But that's my freedom. What freedom is to you most likely will look a little bit different than mine. But what does freedom look like to you? What does it feel like? What would it feel like to be free? Like, literally take a moment to think about that. What would it feel like to be free as a woman? What kind of life would you expect if you were free? And what is free? Is it free to move around, free to not have a headscarf, free to live wherever you want, free to do whatever you want? Like, I was recently talking about on one of my stories how I was at a bar by myself having a great time, and some guy came up to me and was like, "Oh my God, are you alone?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Well, that's such a travesty. Like, that's crazy. Why are you alone?" And I asked him, like, "Did you ever think that I chose to be alone? That I didn't need a man or another person to validate me, to say that, oh, I'm a good person, people like me, and that I'm not alone and lonely and sad because I'm alone?" But no, he didn't. Because as a woman at a bar by herself was like, "Oh my God, that you must have no friends, you must have no life, and you're pretty." So I'm really confused why that would be the case. So again, let's fight what is normalized so we can be free and live the lives that we truly desire and not ones we're settling for. That's what I got for you today. I guess I will see you guys next week. I would love to hear your thoughts. Again, I asked for you to share this. Share the story of Masha. Let people know about what's going on as the Iran government wants to silence their voices. You can help prevent that by sharing the story and getting the word out. I love you, and I'll talk to you next week. Ciao. Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you like hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.